So, welcome, ladies and gents. This is Theodice from Team Property and ESPORTPODDEN. ESPORTPODDEN is basically a Swedish talk show, and we usually, invite Swedish guests to talk some esports. But I have an honorable guest with me today, and it's Brandon Altman, previously the founder and CEO of Clarity Gaming. And I'm very glad to have you here, sir.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me, Petter.
God bless America.
God bless America.
So, for those who don't know, we spoke something beforehand, but how are you doing? Is everything as it should be back in America?
Everything's good. It's a little cold out here, but I'm working now mostly. Now that I'm kind of switching gears out of esports for the most part, now I kind of have esports as a side gig.
Okay. So I think we should jump straight into it, but what I mostly would like to talk about in this show is being the guy behind the team, pretty much. Being the founder, being the your dog entered again.
You're good.
It's
You're
back.
good. It's fine. He'll enter and leave at his leisure.
So being the manager, having the sponsor relations and stuff like that, and pretty much how you found a team and how you make it work.
Roger
So,
that.
but I want to start off about talking about you from the beginning, and how did you get into esports? Was it through gaming in general, and just oh, this esports thing seems cool, or do you have any background in esports as well?
Well, I've played and been involved in video gaming as a whole since I was really young, but I'd say the definitive point where I got into esports as opposed to being, working for a clan or an amateur organization as a hobby was probably the beginning of StarCraft 2. I started off as an assistant manager of an organization called Sagacity Gaming, which was a Korean-American semi-professional clan that was basically StarCraft 2. And I moved up from assistant manager to general manager, and I eventually took over the team in the end. And that kind of really gave me a better understanding of esports from a professional side. I put together a number of online tournaments with a couple $1,000 prize pool, and during
Starting
this
to build a
time,
network with people.
yeah, exactly.
Getting a
During this
feel of
time,
it.
I was exactly. You have to. Esports is a lot about networking, and that's why at the same time I was working as a tournament organizer for IEM and a couple other smaller tournament organizations, kind of learning the ropes, getting to know people, etc.
Okay. And was it basically from there that how did you really came up with the idea of starting up and founding Clarity Gaming to begin with? Like, was it like an appearance from God, something like you woke up a morning and, I'm gonna start a team, or how did it all, how do you get the idea of really starting a team?
Well, actually, at this time, I was kind of taking a break from esports. Sagacity Gaming had closed its doors, and I was, working back in the, private sector.
Yeah.
And I had gotten a job offer to apply for a job as the general manager of Infinity 7, which was a small North American team at the time.
They grew quite big, right? Like in the end, but they were like shutting down in 2013, right? But it got quite big. Or
They always had a lot of popular following. In terms of size of the organization, it really all depends on what you're talking about. They really didn't go that far. They mostly, did the regional events, and they had a couple of awesome guys and players like Axlev, big personalities that kind of got some fan base going for them.
yeah.
But in terms of the larger North American organizations, we're talking, Complexity, Evil Genius, etc. Really, we're not talking about the same ballpark. I would say that not in a bad way.
But they weren't on that level pretty
Exactly. Complexity and Evil Geniuses have been around for over a decade, and it's taken them a good amount of time to build that brand into what they were. And Infinity 7 was a North American StarCraft 2 team that was, the StarCraft 2 team. But anyway,
much.
so I had gotten an offer to apply for the job, and it kind of got me back into thinking about esports. And I ended up not getting the job with Infinity 7. That kind of left me to the point where I had to decide whether I really wanted to go for something in esports or stay in the private sector. Now, about that time, I was talking to a number of North American StarCraft 2 players like Alex Shu, okay?
Yeah.
And they were in an organization that was called Back to Back Gaming, and they had been on this road of about 8 months where they had been hopping from team to team because teams kept lying to them.
Or keep turning down their promises pretty much. They were
Exactly.
trying to fulfill their promises, but they couldn't. So.
Exactly. And now here's the thing. This team had gone through two different organizations, and they were still playing in team leagues. They were still practicing on a weekly basis, and there was really no management, no staff, no sponsors, no organization to support them. But the fact that they really kept going through it all said a lot to me. And at that point, I kind of realized that if I was going to be in esports and I was going to do this as a full-time thing, I wanted to help the people who otherwise weren't getting the kind of support that they could get and they deserve to get. And
really, recognizing both the hard working and the skill as well, like a synergy effect, pretty much.
exactly, because I mean, when it comes down to it, a lot of these kids, a lot of them are going full-time. They're not pursuing higher education. They're not pursuing experience in the workforce, and it has to mean something.
Yeah.
And the North American scene back then, and I mean even to now, is riddled with the same kind of teams who are in it for 2 months. They promise huge things that there's no way they can possibly fulfill, and when it comes down to the deadline to fulfilling those promises, the door's shut down. And that's what I didn't want to be in, that kind of situation, and I wanted to have a place where those players could get the respect they deserve and, could actually move forward with the potential that they had. And that was the idea going in.
So, like from day one, as Clarity Gaming got started, like what was the initial idea? Because when Clarity Gaming was launched, to most of the people out there, I think that it was received by a goal of really reaching a higher ambition, like to really compete with the big dogs. That was the impression because of the graphics, your post was like really well written and people were really getting behind you guys. So how were your plan from like day one to become the team that you were wanting yourself to be?
Well, that's the hard question beforehand. The plan going in, and the plan going in.
There was no plan.
We had a plan, but the problem is that all the misconceptions of the esports industry, all the the smoke and mirrors that we employ, okay, from an outside observer, even somebody who's taken an intense interest in the esports scene, looks are not as they seem, okay? And like you said, for a long time, especially in the beginning, of Clarity Gaming, it may have looked like we were hunting for the big dogs and trying to cement our name at the top, and not that that wouldn't have been a great thing for us to do, but in the beginning, it was a fake it till you make it kind of deal.
Yeah,
okay.
but that's also the thing, because you have to really fake it until you make it, as you say, because otherwise you have nothing to sell. Your product is pretty much your brand, and your brand has to be exposed in a certain way to gain followers and moving on like that.
Exactly. Okay, so we had the most polished press releases with the nicest graphics for every post that we could possibly get. We looked into new and innovative ways of pushing our players and pushing our media, and a lot of that out-of-the-box approach kind of won us support from the community and from a lot of different teams and organizations, which really did a lot to support us in the end. But realistically speaking, honestly, the plan that we had in the beginning for what was going to make Clarity Gaming a success, if I had known everything that I had about team ownership, 2 years after, that plan would look nothing like what it actually was. But the general idea, it was a very, very moralistic standpoint. We were trying to build a family of teams and players, which we did, where the players could feel like they had a voice, where they could feel like they had support, and we could help foster their potential and allow them to do something with all the hours they've spent into the game, you know.
And really turn it to something real for them and for yourself.
Exactly, exactly. Now the problem was about how we ended up, you know, trying to go about it, the kind of investments we ended up throwing into it, and for what reasons. But you know, that was the initial idea going in, and that was the plan.
But moving forward, as you know, adding Korean players, you were into Mokto, you were Moktok, yeah,
Jukto,
Yukto. So yeah, yeah,
Jukto,
but
yeah,
what?
Manhyuk,
Yeah, there you
yeah,
have
Manhyuk,
it.
Jukto,
And
yeah.
yeah, and some several others. You had like quite a few of them, like four
Yeah,
players or something like that.
well, there were a number of Korean players that had been with Clarity, you know, through its existence, and part of that was because of the fact that again, Sagacity Gaming, which was the former organization that I'd been heavily involved with and ended up running, was a Korean American semi-professional organization with players both on this side of the ocean and the other side of the ocean.
Yeah.
And the other was that you know, we had a couple of key individuals like Mercy, who was a former back-to-back player who's been on Clash, and basically is an influential person in the Korean scene and works with a number of different organizations. And he helped Clarity, both on the staff and as a player, to kind of facilitate these connections. But a lot of what it comes down to why we ended up going for, you know, bringing on some Korean players, it was never in a bid to to buy results. For instance,
Yeah.
okay, the vast majority of what we aim to do with our South Korean players is we attempted to recruit players who had a lot of potential, whose potential hadn't yet been realized, but who also did have a high skill level. But now the biggest part of acquiring a new Korean player for us was that they had to be very willing and understanding of the fact that we expected them to be practicing on a daily basis with, you know, the North American players. We
Yeah.
expected them to be attending practices, we expected them to be attending team leagues, and we expected them to be, you know, for all intents and purposes, just another member of the team. Okay, and that's why, you know,
How did it all work
yeah.
out? Not as a total of clarity, but did your as you say you were like trying to combine these two forces as to working together pretty much and learning from each other to really grow your American players. How did it work out with the cultural differences there might be and the division of Korean practice versus the American way of practice? Or the
Uh,
Western way of
well,
practice, I should say.
with the benefit of hindsight, I would say that such a strong focus on having the Korean players consistently only play with the American players hurt the peak form of the Korean players.
Yeah,
You know, in the sense that you know, they could have been spending the entirety of their time practicing only with people at the very peak of their level.
yeah,
Where in some instances we did have them practice with North American players who, you know, may not have been able to compare in terms of in-game skill, etc.
yeah,
Now, in terms of North American players, obviously, I don't think that could ever have a negative impact. Playing with a, you know, stronger Korean player, and I think for the vast majority, if not all of the North American players, having the opportunity to play with certain Korean players who they otherwise wouldn't have the opportunity to practice with,
yeah,
to play with, to talk to, you know, it does help. And with regards to the culture shock, you know, a lot of most of the Korean players who were on Clarity lived in the team house alongside North American players, myself, you know, and were here for extended periods of time. And obviously, some of them dealt with it in different ways, but the entire outlook of the team was all about everyone helping each other and everyone working alongside each other. So I
yeah.
think that did have an impact on lessening the culture shock just because they have to interact so much and it's such a big part of their life and for
Yeah,
the
it
they're
became
living.
a normal part of their daily life, pretty much in
Exactly.
their environment. And speaking of, you know, you got Clarity Gaming running now, and partly you invested in getting a team house, as you mentioned. How were the thoughts of partly, justifying for yourself as a team to go for the team house, and what kind of return on investment were you expecting, like from your point of view back then? Do you think when it came to what kind of maybe content could you produce and what can this lead to? So, what were your initial plan with getting the team house?
Well, for the first part, we didn't buy a team house. Okay, we
Yeah,
didn't go out and purchase a house for the explicit purpose.
yeah,
Okay, we were able to take over a house and change it, put desks in, get bunk beds in, etc., and basically use that house and pay off the utilities, for the house itself. But we didn't go out and buy a house, so the impact was a lot less than some people might have surmised in the past. However, even with that, on return on investment, it's a pretty hard thing, period, to get a return on investment in esports. Now, for the house itself, the house was never expected to have an explicit monetary return on investment. We did take a small rent from each player outside of the top Korean player we would have at the time, who would be able to live in the house at a small salary,
yeah,
or for a small rent fee. But even with that rent, we didn't come anywhere near the expenses of actually housing them, feeding them, et cetera, et cetera. The training facility itself was meant to be a loss leader in the sense that it's meant to be, something
that would boost
that
the whole
player,
team. Yeah,
yeah, for status for the players themselves, to give them better opportunities to compete, to give them a better opportunity in an environment to foster, stronger skill and team building itself. Okay, but it was never intended to be something where we were going to get back more than we spent, unless by some stretch we ended up getting it covered by a sponsor. But that's a pretty difficult task in esports.
yeah. And talking about sponsors, as the general consensus of people were during. Oh, no smoking, man! Oh my God, you're so
I
healthy.
know.
It's like shit.
God bless America. I
No,
just had
man.
a just had a bacon burger. I'm smoking a cigarette. You're lucky I'm not busting out the Budweiser.
God bless. So continuing with the way of sponsors is that the general consensus of the community were that where are they getting their money from? But that's a later stage of this interview. But more that how did you really approach sponsors as Clarity Gaming, and how did you feel that it was hard for you to getting a real contact and opening up the sponsors for the opportunity of going into Clarity Gaming compared like with the other big dogs as you mentioned before that's already established in America?
Well, if you're asking if it was harder for us to get a sponsor for Clarity than it would be for Complexity, sure, but rightfully so, okay,
Yeah, oh yeah,
because
of course, of course.
Clarity's numbers next to Complexity's, it's not even in the ballpark, okay. But
Yeah.
in terms of where the money came from, the problem is that if we were a money laundering outfit, it would be the worst money laundering outfit. Because all we do is burn money. But
Yeah,
no,
but how was your approach going to sponsors and telling them you should support Clarity Gaming? Was like sharing your knowledge that you might have in hindsight now, is that how were you approaching sponsors, and what were like maybe your selling point that maybe people can learn from, and what your ways of getting sponsored were?
well, here's the deal. For the most part, esports in general, your selling points are your numbers,
Yeah,
your results, your exposure, and the kind of outreach you can give for a company. Okay,
yeah,
because you're asking a company to devote some of their advertising and marketing budget towards your team. Now they're going to expect advertising and marketing budget and results for that money. Okay.
yeah.
And one of the hard parts is that esports in general, you're not getting the same kind of money in dollar bills that you're getting for the same type of numbers because of, the internet, because of the industry. And because we don't have that much to leverage as
And pretty much the
established
target
sports teams.
audience as well is that it's not the most they're not the most wealthy target audience that's out there as well. So
Well, actually, to refute that, the target demographic for esports is one of the best demographics, most coveted and hardest to reach demographics, period. The 18 to 34 male demographic is coveted by almost every marketing agency because during that time, people are establishing the purchasing patterns that they're going to have for the rest of their life. Okay, you're figuring out, what brand of soda that you're going to drink forever, what brand of beer, okay, what brand of cigarettes you're going to smoke, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. So it actually is a very important demographic, but the problem is that at the very top of it, you're still not able to leverage enough to get the kind of money that you would expect for the outreach that's provided.
So, would you say that your main issue with getting sponsors and getting support from team for Clarity Gaming was that you didn't have enough numbers at the current state of like the team were when you were looking for support, or what would you say were the issues of not getting why the main reason behind Clarity Gaming isn't where still around today? Is that what were the main issues with getting the sponsorships for your part?
Well, there's a number of them. The endemic sponsors are monopolized by the larger esports organizations, and for good reason, because these are companies that understand the esports industry, and they know the companies that have the most pull, the most outreach, etc. Okay, so if we're talking about endemic sponsorships, we're fighting for the same kind of sponsorships that Complexity is trying to get, that Property may be trying to get, that every other team wants, because endemic sponsors are endemic sponsors. We know what their industry are, and we all go after them. Okay, so the question is, why would you sponsor a smaller organization that, even though they may work harder, would only be able to do X amount, instead of giving your money to the larger organization that can give you more of a guarantee on the kind of numbers you're going to get, and really have it be more worthwhile in the end, on a marketing and advertising front.
Okay. So, that being said, this is really a hard one, and you can answer this as how you would like to answer it, pretty much.
Roger that.
During the operational time of Clarity Gamer, it was more than 1.5 years.
Yeah.
Something like that. And during what time of your uptime did you think that this is really hard, and what kind of, how are we gonna really get it to sustain itself and get it going? Because you have this goal, you want to keep it at a certain level. When you have it at a certain level, when you have a team house, you want to keep the team house, and you want to be able to still send your players internationally. So at what time in the Clarity Gaming history were you how are we gonna solve this? At what point do you think?
Well, the entire time of the Clarity organization was, a long distance sprint. Okay, really,
I understand.
on a daily basis, I would wake up, I would make food for players that lived with me. I would sit on the computer. I would wake up to 40 plus messages from Skype from all around the country and the world about everyone, about X issue, Y issue, Z issue. There was a long period of time where I was sleeping on the floor in my office, okay, while I had, the players living in the house with beds, etc., eating, and I was eating ramen while they were eating steak, okay? So when it got really hard, I mean, the thing is, it was always pretty difficult from the start. But at the end of it, it got to the point where there wasn't a realistic end goal that we were going to be able to achieve before I was completely dry money-wise, and I wouldn't have any sanity. Yeah, I mean, we had always done our utmost to fulfill all the obligations and promises that we signed up for. Yeah. Okay, and had we gone further, it wouldn't have been possible. So, I mean, at about that point, that's when I knew that we had to start looking at other options.
Would you say that you were trying too hard to do everything by yourself? Like not getting maybe enough staff, because when you see different kind of organization that's does run an esport for free pretty much, there are like 5 people in the management, and so what were the staff like, and how did you recruit the staff and management, and how much work were you actually putting in by yourself compared to really having a manager to see over different kind of situations and help you in the daily operations, pretty much.
Well, here's another thing to understand about, esports, especially the level even that, Clarity was at, which was pretty large at the, at our peak.
Yeah.
Our staff, for the vast majority of our staff was unpaid. I never took a dollar out of Clarity, period. Okay.
Yeah.
The vast majority of our senior staff and our management wasn't paid. That doesn't mean we didn't have a staff. We had a pretty large staff at different times. The downside of that is, again, that they were volunteer staff. You couldn't pay them. Okay. So you're asking people who are basically, the majority of them are in it because they're passionate about esports, and they want more fame, publicity, they want more responsibility, recognition, whatever it is. People have many different, reasons for getting into esports. But these are people who not only, for the most part, don't have experience in the exact field that you're asking them to, okay? Because how many 22-year-olds, or 23-year-olds
experts in marketing and
yeah, okay, it's crazy. They don't have job experience in that field. Most of the 99% of them didn't go to school for the field that they're being asked to do, and they're either not being paid, or they're not being paid anywhere near what they should be for doing that kind of a job. And then you get into your conundrum of, we maybe could have got more staff. There were times where we had 20 staff, okay? But you're asking for people's free time, and would I have loved to to hand a lot of other stuff off throughout my term, of course, and I did hand off a number of things, but in the end
it got done, or it wasn't done right.
Yeah. Well, and it was my money financially invested for the most part, okay?
Yeah.
So that's a different outlook when you're 100% financially invested, as opposed to volunteer work where they're not bringing back a salary. Okay, so it's an obvious flaw of the system that we tried to compensate for as well as we could have. Because trust me, I would have loved to be paying staff. Okay, but we didn't have anywhere near that kind of funds at the end.
So, I would also, want you to ask you this, is that what was the biggest thing that you learned from handling Clarity Gaming, as, when it comes to like every part of it, like the finances, or what do you think was your biggest learning experience that you would share with another guy or girl who might be thinking of starting up an esports team and, are thinking about how to do it? What was the biggest experience you think that you might be able to share?
Costs a lot more than you expect it to, really.
Yeah.
I mean, that's first and foremost a lot more than you expect it to. Travel alone is gigantic. And what I learned, I would say one of the bigger things would be to ensure that you have enough of a separation between employees and employer. And in the esports industry, that's a very hard thing to do, because there are always going to be situations, and I'm sure you've been through them being in team management yourself, where your heart is being pulled in one direction, and even though a player may not, that a player is not going to win this tournament, that he's not going to place in the top 10. Okay, but they want to go so bad, and they've been working so hard, and you want them to win. Okay, you want it for them. Okay, and having
being the real businessman in the situation required.
It is. It's important, because potential's not enough in esports.
Do you feel that the esports community from time to time might be a bit too rough in some situations, because it's like a bit too senseless and heartless?
In ways, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, because the fake it till you make it scheme, where basically we put out as professional a front as we can, and every esports team does it. If the public knew exactly how most esports teams are run and what goes on behind the scenes, the normal level of maturity in some instances, okay, why certain routes are taken, they would be shocked and appalled, okay? Because the fact is that because of the esports industry and because we're professional now, okay, we have a new standard that's put in front of us, and we try and go above and beyond. And the fact is that we are small organizations pretending to be just like private conglomerates, okay? And the fact is that we're not. We don't have that kind of money, okay? We don't have that kind of staff. We don't have that kind of experience. We don't have that much on the line, okay? And when it comes down to it, can we really be surprised when the masses are uninformed with how esports really works, when we do everything in our power to make sure they don't see how the sausage is made? You know?
So, as a segue also from that question is that what would you like to see happen in like the esports scene and the esports industry, both from the economical hindsight, but also like from every point of view in the competition as well? Is that what would you like to see, like the changes maybe from sponsorships, or what do you think like the ideal world of esports in 10 years will be for also new starting organizations as well who want to make it big?
Well, self-sustaining income, okay, meaning we need new varied streams of revenue that have nothing to do with sponsorship. Okay, I'm talking real pushes towards merchandising, okay, towards even, fundraising as necessary, okay? But the fact is that teams live or die purely based off of sponsorships. It's the one metric that allows them to survive, and it's the one metric that if you don't have, you're done. It's the one metric. You could have the worst team management. You could have some pretty awful players. If you have strong sponsorship behind you, you'll live a lot longer than you should. You may not be the number one team in the end, but that's what you're required to survive. Okay, so teams need to be able to monetize more, okay, from their own original content, their own original media content, okay, to their own merchandise, because the stream of revenue that we're expecting to feed esports is not large enough for our idea of how large esports is, okay, because we see all these teams that are also putting out a professional front, and we don't realize that the vast majority of them are living budget to budget, and wondering how they're going to survive.
Quarter to quarter, pretty much is that.
Exactly. And wondering what the hell they're going to do next quarter if they don't get X sponsor back, if they lose Y sponsor, or they can't get Z sponsor to cover their obligations. Okay, that's not a good way. That's not a good way to live. Okay, it's not a good way to run a company.
But do you think that for many people look at esports team, they shouldn't be companies pretty much. They shouldn't be but to counter that, we as an esports team, you don't get access to any of the live broadcasting incomes from the live tournaments that maybe football and soccer gets. The TV license and stuff like that, licenses matches that you generate a specific income. Is that how much of a company do you think esports team need to be self-sustained in like the environment that is today?
Well, I would say that's kind of like being pregnant. You really can't be half pregnant. You're either a company or you're not a company. Yeah. Okay, so for the people that are saying esports organizations shouldn't be companies, they really don't know what they're talking about, because all the issues that esports organizations have to deal with, from traveling over country borders, okay, from hiring people to work for you on a salary, okay, to having contractors, having property under your name, okay, it's a company, okay, if you don't want it to be a company, then you're talking about going back to the day when there was no evil geniuses, there's no complexity, okay, and there's clans, okay, there's little clans fighting for $5 online cups at maximum, okay, that's what you're talking about. What happens if MLG is not a company, okay? You know, it's not a really valid argument in my opinion, but people have them, I guess.
Oh yeah. But something positive to take off from this esports is a general mess. But during your time in Clarity Gaming, do you have a specific memory that you remember back in the glory days of Clarity Gaming that really makes you happy and really things that justify your investment just both personally and financially in Clarity Gaming? It's like, do you have a really good memory?
Well, I had a lot of them. I would say the best parts of esports were the relationships I built, the people I met, the people I lived with, the people I worked with, the people I worked for, the people who worked for me. Okay, I still talk to a lot of them. We had players fly over from Korea and live with me who would, barely spoke English when they came here, and by the time they left, they were talking and everything. Okay, there's one specific instance I think that I always do remember back to. I had a Sungjin Shuttle. I don't know if you remember, he was a Korean Terran player. He was on Clarity for a long time, and he stayed 2 tours in the Clarity facility. And when he left, on his chair, he wrote like a 2-page note thanking me, like how he valued all the experiences that he had with Clarity in America, with his friends now, and the people he considered his new family, and it felt good to be able to impact these guys in a positive way, when you consider that most of the reinforcement these guys get is negative. They're working their ass off in a hard industry that's you don't get a lot of thanks for doing.
Yeah, it's not really rewarding in the long run for many of the guys. It's like 90% of all the people in esports, or the players are, it's so hard for them.
And you want to make that time count, and we may not have succeeded in everything that we did, but I can pretty well guarantee that the vast majority of our players are happy with the time they spent, and they value the experiences that they had, and I think while it may not fill my wallet back up, it is it is a good thing that you keep with you.
So what are your plans for the future? Do you think of yourself returning into esports in some way? Do you think of reviving Clarity Gaming? Is that an option of yours, or like, what does the future hold in store for Brandon?
Well, no to reviving Clarity Gaming. Not in a bad way. I just don't have that kind of money anymore. But I still am in esports, not as a full-time thing, but I do contract work for various organizations in North America, like project management, community building, website building, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. So am I saying that I'm not going to be back in esports full-time? No. It's just that having spent a number of years not only working as a volunteer, but paying to work as a volunteer, it's got to be worth my time, because I do pretty well in the private world, and for me to throw myself back into full-time esports, it's got to be with some security as an end game, and I don't, not that I don't have as much passion for esports. I love esports. I still follow and play consistently, but I don't have enough passion, and maybe it's passion, I don't know if it's called passion at that point or crazy.
Yeah, the program passion is like,
yeah,
the word of esports.
Exactly. I ran at a sprint for 2 years, okay, and if anyone is ever going to ask me to do that again, I hope they have a lot of money behind the asking.
So, also during your time in Clarity Gaming, is there any specific people that you would like to thank in this, that might be viewing this video when we upload it and might be some special people that you have?
Thanking all of Clarity Game. I mean, I would thank all of Clarity Gaming. From the players to the staff. To the guys that worked with us, the guys that knew us, the guys that helped us out. Number one person, that I have to mention no matter what is Mike Winter, who was my COO for a long time. That guy, he's the only reason I made it through with my brain intact, still sane. Okay, he's worked his butt off too, and I wouldn't have been able to bring Clarity as far as we had without his help. Also, shout out to Alex. Without Alex, Clarity wouldn't have existed in the first place. And while we
you
may
have to
not
mention their nicknames as well.
Oh, Shoe and Winter. Without Shoe, Clarity wouldn't exist in the first place. And even though we may not be here now, I still think the few years we were open were pretty impactful years for the StarCraft community and for the team and players as a whole. And thank you very much, Petter. You've always been my favorite COO of a Swedish organization.
Thank you.
The most handsome one too.
Oh shit! Thanks. It's not many people that give me that because I'm so short in real life. I look big when I sit here. So yeah.
You got the camera. You're good. I can't see the bottom half.
I got good lighting. I got my glasses, my pim glasses.
You look 6'10" under that chair.
Oh, so sweet. It's the... Oh my god. No, but anyway, it was a pleasure having you, Brandon. And you're quite good at Counter-Strike as well, so maybe you should consider a Counter-Strike Global Offensive. You have
I am
Team Liquid
awful.
now.
Okay, Petter, if the bar for professional esports was being able to beat you, I would be a pro in so many games by now.
Oh yeah, this is a side story, and for those people, I'm sorry, but you remember back in the days we were playing like a best of three?
StarCraft.
And I got so mad because he beat me, so I fucking destroyed the keyboard, man. I with my fist, my mighty Swedish fist, so I fucking broke the keyboard. It was like I don't know, it was a $200 keyboard pretty much. It was, the majestic Filco Majestic Touch, like a brand new fucking keyboard, and I fucking broke it because I got so mad.
I don't think it hurt either that I'm a cheesy bastard.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I know too many people who've done that because of me. Oh god. I'm sorry, Petter, but we can have a rematch soon. I promise I haven't learned any more cheesy builds.
Yeah, I got this cheap Apple keyboard now, so it's cool. I think I could break it. So.
All right, so I'll send you another keyboard too. We'll see. Well, just for insurance.
By the way, can't you just share the thing that you did in Clarity as well for, you had like a weekly thing that you were playing the players against each other for like motivation?
Every week in the team match, we would have something called a chicken match, which is basically where one of my team players would be able to challenge me, and the loser had to buy, chicken dinner of some kind. Korean players love chicken. So I only won one time, and that was against Modoke, who's still around playing. And that's because it was a Terran versus Terran, and he fast expanded, and I proxy 6-raxed.
And you were like smiling all the way.
Oh, I was so happy. I think that was the only possible way for me to beat him, is him CC firsting while I proxy 6-raxed. I'm pretty sure he could have beat me if he did anything else than that,
But just a single question, one last single question here is, do you think that those kind of routines and challenges and fun stuff is important for people that are living so closely to each other on a daily basis?
Oh yeah. I mean, if anyone who's been in college, in a dormitory, in the army, in a barracks, when you live with so many people in a close area, people are going to get on each other's nerves. It happens. It's a normal thing. Okay, so having as much team building, exercises, having fun events that doesn't have a competitive backdrop behind it. Like, instead of just two people practicing 1v1s, that's still a frustrating experience at times. Losing it is, so it's good to switch gears and, not have the players think about that stuff. Because, I mean, I know you probably dealt with it too. A lot of players, tend to have some issues, mentally with staying on the ball after working so hard for so long and not necessarily achieving what they want to achieve. And everyone has higher goals than, they can achieve at that time.
Great, but once again, Brandon, thank you so much for participating in ESPORTPODDEN. It's a
Of
Swedish word.
course.
And
Esports Poden.
ESPORTPODDEN.
Yeah.
So, and God bless America, man. And
God bless America.
we
And
will.
Sweden. God bless Sweden.
Oh yeah, of course, of course. It's so much snow here though, so it's. But also thanks to you at home for watching this video, and hopefully this has been, insightful of the esports way of running a team, and Brandon as well for your thoughts and your experience, and are willing to, just to share your story pretty much.
Of course.
So we will release another video next week of Esport Podden. I don't know which guest I will have. It might be a Swede, it might be an English speaking person, I don't know. But we will see about that. And once again, thanks you for watching and take care back home.